Yoga practice is not complete unless one is a good householder. Force of habit helps you, and your very nature takes a basic change. What we call individuality is only a force of habit, but it is of a deeper nature. What we call the personality is a force of habit. Everyone has his own personality different from another, and it is only due to constant practice in a particular direction that character shapes itself, and the tradition of a family takes its own shape, and the characteristic traits of a nation take shape, and the characteristics of a particular family, they take shape. Now let your life take a direction producing an activity self-prescribed. It rectifies all the oddities of our temperament and character. Instead of fighting out habit and fighting out the oddities and inequalities of the temperament and trying to waste our time and energy, you begin to make a new practice which leads your life in a better direction. Then the activity of the whole family will be directed. If you go to a backward country like India and observe what we call the traditional family, you will find some impossible things. You will find families where all the members of the family are in one direction and one attitude of life. No doubt they are less individualistic and they are less rationalistic and less intellectuals, but they are masculine enough to live happily. The kingdom of happiness, which we can call the kingdom of God, is theirs, and no one can come on the way of their happiness. There are people who live happily continuously, and if anyone thinks that something else is more valuable than happiness, we have to pity the logic of the poor fellow. And it is the power of habit applied to a whole family that makes a happy family of a husband and wife living happily and rejoicing the company of their children, instead of feeling very busy when the child comes to the fellow. Instead of living a worthless commercial life in the house, the fellow lives very happily with the little angels whom he calls children and grandchildren. And the parents play the role of the gurus to the children and grandchildren. And there is no generation gap in the family. And this is what is expected of the best use of the force of habit. We can't say there is a better form of education than to use habit in this way. If we have the stature enough to define education in its true sense, not in the commercial sense, then we can understand how best we can use the force of habit. Unfortunately, we are passing through a century where education is only a memory test. We are only in a Paleolithic stage as far as education is concerned. Everyone who undergoes the present education is poor enough to have a stunted growth of his mental faculties, because we can never escape the shock received by our false way of educating ourselves. The more educated a fellow is, the more stunned his face is, because he is denied of his expression every moment. He is forced to represent other authors than to represent himself, and he is forced to accept that it is education. Let us try to understand that education is a science of alignment. Just as a photographer makes a good focus of his camera to the landscape, so also the real educationalist makes a better focus of the mind and the senses and the will and the understanding and intelligence of the student, so that the indweller receives a clear picture of the outer universe. That is real education according to the definition of the masters of wisdom.